Okay, hello. Welcome again to Notopia. Today's mini lecture is all about um, the virtual reality issues of immersion and presence. Okay, particularly presence, really important concept that we commonly see in the virtual reality literature that we need to understand. Okay, So what's going to happen in this mini lecture, I'm going to be talking about what is immersion. I'm going to be talking about what is presence. And then I will, there are a number of different types of presence, sometimes referred to as illusions of presence. And I'll go through those, explain their significance. There's this particular issue associated with breaks in presence, which is very important for designers of virtual reality and virtual environments to minimize. And I'll finish by going through some of the key methods that are used for measuring presence, if that's particularly important, for instance, within an experiment. So, okay, so many people will think of immersion and presence as being the same thing, but they are in reality quite different. Immersion. So immersion is an objective quality. Okay, the degree to which the virtual reality system and application projects stimuli onto the sensory receptors of users in a way that is, and then there are a number of different things in here. So the key thing here is that immersion is objective. Okay, so, which means that it has a degree of reality. It's observable, and often that will mean it's also quantitative as well. And there is a number of different factors to immersion. So immersion is extensive, so it means it's across the different modalities: vision, the auditory modality, tactile, proprioceptive. So with high levels of immersion, we're working across a variety of different sensory modalities. It's matching, so you have a match between a real world equivalent and the virtual reality world in the way that something might happen. The sense of surrounding, so we're sort of enveloping the senses. So that's most obvious related to vision, where the field of view is an obvious quality associated with immersive virtual reality. Okay, but it could be related to spatial audio. So we're getting this sounds coming from different directions. So maybe in this virtual world, being able to hear people behind me, and so I turn my head to respond to them. It may be vivid, so it's sort of high quality to the visual senses. So that might relate particularly to resolution and maybe frame rate. It's interactive. High immersion means high interaction. So it means that I can actually influence the world as well. It's a two-way thing. So I can reach out, touch things. I can move things. I can change this world that I'm with. That's truly interactive. And the last one, which we may not necessarily consider, but is also important to immersion, is a sense of purpose. There's a story. There's a plot. There's an unfolding series of events that occur within this virtual space. So if we think of the picture here, in virtual reality, in a sort of entertainment sort of travel environment, we've got Machu Picchu here, and you can experience that with a logical flow. So much like going to the real world and having a tour guide, you can have the virtual equivalent of that within that particular application. But equally, if you want to go and explore the world freely, you can also do that. And those two different ways have a real world equivalent. So there's a clear way in which you can engage with that environment. And that's what sort of referred to here as plotting for me. So if immersion is the objective sense of virtual reality, then presence is the subjective response to that objective measured version of virtual reality. So as it says here, how the user subjectively experiences the objective immersion is known as presence. And there are different ways of thinking about that. The most commonly considered version of presence is the being there or being elsewhere perspective. As Whitmer and Singer say, the subjective experience of being in one environment even when one is physically situated in another. So that's important, but as we'll see in the next slide, actually that's one part of presence. There are other parts of presence, and a different way of thinking about it is just in terms of performance. So if we have appropriate levels of performance, or success, as it says here, successfully supported action in the environment, then we have high presence. So in many ways, that's associating presence with validity. Okay, and there certainly is a view that presence and validity are closely related. As I say down here, presence is important for a simulator or a virtual reality experience, as it can be associated with high levels of validity. There can be good correlation here. If people believe they're in a virtual environment, they're likely to respond. If they believe they're in the real environment, even though they're not, so they may behave in much more realistic ways, so we can have good validity. So, this is sort of a simple way of representing the fact that presence isn't all about being somewhere, sort of believing that you're somewhere that you're not. We have to think about it in terms of relation to real worlds and to imaginary worlds. So yes, if you've got low presence, you've just got this perception that I'm here. So for me at the moment, a low level of presence would be perceiving I'm just still in my office at home. I'm not in Notopia. I'm just here in my office with my desk, just next to me. So that would be the perception here. But there, it's sort of related to a real world. Would be thinking, I'm in this other space that doesn't exist at the moment. That does exist at the moment. So I'm there. I'm driving my car down the M1 motorway. Okay, related to a real world. Whereas elsewhere is I'm just in an imaginary environment. That's where I am, and I believe that I'm there. So I may not have any experience of walking on the surface of Mars. Nobody has experience of walking on the surface of Mars, but I may, through virtual reality, believe that I'm there and act in a way that I think is appropriate for that space, that is still high presence. Okay. So these illusions of presence, or we can consider them as sort of types of presence. There are four fundamental types here. Okay, the first one is the most obvious one, the one that's related to most of what I've said so far for presence and what most people think of presence. Is it's being somewhere else, being in a different environment. Okay, and I think it's important to say that we have to think about it as being stable. So I have high environmental presence if I believe I'm somewhere else, and I continue to believe that I'm somewhere else. So I have good. The world has it's a good frame rate. There's not poor latency, so it is stable for me. Personal presence is a really, really interesting one. So the extent to which I feel I have a body within the virtual world. So I have, so here I have hands, and they relate to the way in which I'm moving my real hands. So there's good self-embodiment there, but then I don't have any legs. I don't have a torso. So part of my sense of a body is not there, and it's worth saying that it doesn't have to be your own body for there to be a sense of personal presence. But maybe I've chosen a different body, and I can still have good personal presence through that avatar. And I'll be talking a lot more about the whole all the human factors issues associated with avatars in one of the future mini lectures. We can have high presence with the illusion of physical interaction. So being able to actually influence the world, okay, to be able to touch things, to move things, to interact in a two-way. These are also important for presence. And the last one is about the sense of being able to communicate with others. They may not be necessarily real people, they may be the AI agents, but there is high social presence if I feel like I can verbally communicate with others within the world, but also I can non-verbally communicate with others. So in my avatar here, I can express myself non-verbally through my hand movements and my head movements to a degree, but I cannot change my facial expressions. I also cannot use eye movements to non-verbally communicate with others. So those aspects are missing from my degree of presence, and that will influence my social interactions with others in this space. Last point in here is that you can have a breakdown in these illusions. When that breakdown occurs, that is known as a break in presence, and that could arise, for example, for me now, because my phone starts to ring. It could be because I trip over something. I walk into my office chair, or someone comes in and asks me for a cup of tea from the family. These are all breaks in presence. In the driving simulator, we may get that because somebody, a participant in the car, looks into their blind spot and they can see a door there, okay, or someone knocks on the car window. These all form breaks in presence, and through our virtual reality, through our procedures that we might adopt in a study, we aim to minimize breaks in presence. Okay. Just in terms of the picture here, this is from a virtual reality concert that occurred during the summer for the electronic music pioneer Jean-Michel Jarre. Okay, he's quite sort of yeah. For people of a certain age, will know him. You can look him up. But he gave a concert completely in virtual reality over the summer, and you can see up in the top left the reality of a person just in their bedroom with their headset on, but within the virtual world, they're dancing on the dance floor with Jean-Michel Jarre giving the concert. So he's up on the top here. That's his avatar. So his avatar is chosen to represent him quite well. But other people have chosen avatars that may or may not relate to themselves at all. So some of these avatars down here are quite similar to real people and how they want to represent themselves. But there are others in here, like a Frankenstein's monster, and there's even a milk carton. The people, they're all dancing together, and then this person, real person up here in their bedroom, is may have high levels of presence associated with maybe with self embodiment, with social communication, where they can interact with the world, and they believe they're actually on this dance floor with Jean-Michel Jarre very close to them. But these things are important things for us to think about when we design virtual reality experiences. Okay, so last couple of slides are really about the measurement of presence as a concept, and this is important if we're doing studies and we want to understand the outcomes associated with our designed virtual reality simulation experiences. So, not surprisingly, because presence is a subjective construct, then the most common approach used for measuring presence are questionnaires. Okay? And there are a number of different questionnaires with ordinal ratings, and I'll show a few examples of these in minutes. Now, in some areas, particularly for certain visual experiences, but also in the area of haptics, you might use psychophysics, where you look for just noticeable differences. So, for instance, for haptic information, you may compare people touching real tissues as a surgeon. So, sort of within the human body, and compare that to people using virtual reality phantom type device with to also touch those tissues, and see how close together those sensations actually are. Are there noticeable differences? But you may be interested in behaviours. There are certain behaviours that people adopt that indicate high levels of presence. One that's used quite commonly is the response to some form of startle event. So people get in a surprise, something they weren't expecting, and then are they putting their hands in front of their head? Are they jumping back? Are they ducking in order to avoid being hit by something? These these are natural behaviours, and if we see them in our simulation, then or in virtual reality, then it's indicative of high levels of presence. So you can see an example here of people with virtual reality may be used for treatment of phobias. So someone responding to seeing these spiders in this virtual environment may indicate high levels of presence. if they're showing sort of fright responses. And we've seen this many times in our driving simulator, where we have an unexpected situation. Maybe the car in front suddenly slows down. Or for this particular participant, they had an emergency takeover request in a highly automated vehicle, and they're showing startle responses. They're showing a degree of surprise or fear, and this represents high levels of presence. But you may get habitual responses. I've mentioned in the 360 videos about people putting their seatbelts on before they get into a car. That's an habitual response associated with high levels of presence. We may have physiological measures in terms of sweating or the heart rate increasing that represent an emotional response. And as mentioned before, just levels of performance that are consistent with levels of performance in the real world, also associated with high levels of presence. Okay, there are a number of different standard questionnaires, and they've been around for a while, since the mid-1990s or so. They have different dimensions associated with what forms of presence that they focus on. And the last one here, still nearly 20 years or so ago now, is very commonly used. The thing that's interesting about this one is that it also brings in simulator sickness into the view of presence, and it takes the perspective that if people are experiencing symptoms of sickness, then their presence will also be low, because they will be focused on those symptoms rather than the experience of being in the virtual world. So they have a negative perspective. So it's bringing those two concepts together. And this just shows some of those questions from the Leicester and Freeman questionnaire. So it's a 1 to 5 scale, strongly disagree to strongly agree scale, and there's a number of different questions. And this is just part of the questionnaire. There are many more questions than this that are there within it. But just to point out a couple of them. You can see that some relate to sort of to emotions. I felt sad. My experience was over. I would have liked it to continue. What other ones relate to emotion? I enjoyed myself. So there are certain emotional ones in there. There's some associated with the being in a particular place. There are some that are more associated with negative impacts, like I felt tired. There are some that relate to being on a journey. I had a sense that I had returned from a journey. I lost track of time is another one on here. So these are all different aspects associated with presence, but these are standardized ways that allow you to capture those very quickly after an experience. And the last slide just relates to some research from one of my PhD students that looked at the concept of presence, but related it specifically to driving simulators. And he had a number of different questions. These are just a few of them, but you can see some of these might relate to sort of emotions like I felt scared during hazardous situations. Some might relate to the control of the vehicle. Strong sense of physically controlling the vehicle. Again, I felt as if I'd been on a journey, so more strategic parts of the driving task. And there's a social aspect of presence. I was aware that other people were driving cars around me, and interesting ones related to obeying of rules. I felt the need to obey the rules of the road. And this is a similar one here at the bottom related to environmental presence. I remembered I was in a laboratory, and that comes through in lots of different considerations of what we mean by presence. Okay, so that's today's lecture in Notopia. As always, I hope you enjoyed that. Any questions, you know where to find me, and we'll see you all again soon. Okay, take care, everybody. Bye bye.